What's up, everybody? The wait is finally over and totally over. Left at Wall is available now, right now. You can get Left at Wall on Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube Movies. You can get it on demand. You can buy it on DVD. The wait is totally over. Just type in Left at Wall on your search bar on your smart TV, and you can find a bunch of ways to get it. You can watch it now. Again, that's Left at Wall, wherever you get your movies. Episode 75, Chris Kluwe. Chris Kluwe is a former NFL punter, writer, musician, and activist. During his time with the Minnesota Vikings, he got in trouble for his decision to be outspoken in support of marriage equality. I became aware of him around that time and have followed him ever since. He published a piece recently about how he was essentially blackballed from the NFL. Basically, a few years before Colin Kaepernick, there was Chris Kluwe. This is his story. Chris Kluwe, good to meet you. Good to talk to you. Thanks for doing the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? What was your college experience like, and how'd you get into football?
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'm used to be the punter for the Minnesota Vikings from 2005 to 2012, and I was born in Philadelphia because my mom was in med school at the time, but then my parents moved to California when I was like 6 months old, I think. So pretty much for all intents and purposes, I'm a Southern California kid because that's where I grew up. And grew up playing baseball and soccer. Needed a fall sport when I got into high school. And I was like, well, cross country is way too much running, so I'm going to try and do football. And I didn't realize how much running was involved in football. And so I figured I could kick a soccer ball really far, so I'd see if I could kick a football pretty far, and it turns out I could. And played at Los Al, was All-American in high school my senior year, got a scholarship to UCLA, played there for 5 years, I redshirted my freshman year. And then, got picked up by the Vikings as an undrafted, got picked up by the Seahawks as an undrafted free agent, spent preseason with them. They were going to put me on practice squad, and then the Vikings claimed me off waivers for week one. So basically it was like, all right, here's your chance. And held on to the job for 8 years.
So you kind of migrated to punter pretty early then. Like it was kind of always just sort of your thing. In high school, did you kick as well, or was it just punt? Okay.
Yeah, I did both punting and kicking, and I didn't play any other positions because my freshman year in high school, I had just come off a shoulder injury from baseball. I had separated the growth plate in my pitching arm. And so my mom was worried that, if I got hit too hard, it would separate my shoulder again. So it was strictly like no contact except, if you have to make a tackle on kickoff or whatever. I was like, all right. And then sophomore year, the very first tackling drill I ever did, I tore my ACL in my left knee. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I see what the universe is telling me. So I think I'm just going to be a kicker / punter for my career.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's just interesting because I never played football, but some of my friends who did, I know one of my friends was the kicker on the high school team. And the way he got the gig was they needed somebody to do it. Sometimes they would do things like just find a soccer player who's willing to, take the gig and can do it. Sometimes that's not an option. So they literally just lined everybody up and were just go kick this ball. And then he got it the furthest on that particular day. So he got the gig and he goes, I don't even think I'm good at this. And then we were like, no, you can do it. Then we saw him kick the ball off and we were like, oh crap. That's sorry, buddy. Sorry you had the wind in your favor that day, because this is not a cool day for you.
Yeah, no, that was basically my high school freshman tryout. Was it like, just like you said, at the end of first practice, the coach was like, all right, who thinks they can kick? And so basically just lined us up for a PAT. And like, we had this O lineman, Henry Rumpf, and Henry was a big lad. So he lines up to kick it, and I mean, puts it at least 15 yards left of the uprights. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to beat Henry. But for me, it was like, okay, this is literally the only thing I'm out here to do. I better kick this well. And yeah, I just blasted it. And the coach was like, yeah, you're the kicker.
Yeah. And so, and I want to get into a bunch of other parts of your life, but I will ask, like how is the kicking dynamic different? Like is it common to sort of get under the ball, or like it's just always intrigued me how somebody can do that. Like it just sort being able to put a football in between those posts. I don't know. It just looks like like that. And being a hockey goalie, like those are the two things where I'm like, that's a superpower. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you could just talk about the mechanics a little bit to humor me.
Sure,
I'd love it.
Yeah, it's a very niche skill. I mean, it's not something you generally do on a everyday basis. And for me, the real interesting thing was your coaches do not know how to kick a football. So you either have to teach yourself or you have to find someone who knows how to kick a football. I have never had a special teams coach that could actually explain the fundamentals of how to kick or punt a football, which is kind of weird because, you'd think if you had a quarterbacks coach who didn't know how to throw the ball, you'd be like, what the hell is this guy doing out here?
Yeah.
why is he the coach? But yeah, for kicking and punting, it's just kind of like, well, I guess go ahead and try and figure it out. So yeah, essentially the fundamentals for kicking, a lot of it is based on keeping your hips square to your target. So the natural kicking motion that everyone does, kind of growing up doing, is just use your hips to generate power by swiveling them from side to side, because biomechanically that's what your body does. And so when you see kids playing soccer, once you teach them how to not toe poke the ball and actually kick it with their laces, then it becomes, they really wind up and, come across their body, and that's how they're generating power. Now, the problem is that in soccer, it's fine if you miss a lot of shots because you only need like 1 or 2 goals to win a game, right? In football, you got to make pretty much every field goal an extra point because points are really important. And so you have to learn how to take your hips out of the kicking motion because the ball's going to go wherever your hips are pointed at the point of impact. And so that's where a lot of high school kids struggle because, they might have the leg to get the ball there, but they don't necessarily have the accuracy because they're relying on their hips instead of using leg snap and keeping themselves square to the target. So I help coach freshman football at my local high school. And so I'm the special teams coach. So basically every year I get to explain to the freshmen this exact thing. like I'm going to deliberately take some of your power away, but in return, you're going to be way, way more accurate. And when we put you out there, we can actually rely on you getting an extra point or a field goal, assuming the operations are good, which they're not always good. they're freshmen.
Sure.
Yeah, it's that's really the big thing for kicking field goals is, don't try not to use your hips as much as possible. The big thing with punting is you have to learn how to drop the ball properly because your foot is going to go wherever the ball is at. And unlike a soccer ball, which is round, football is an oblate spheroid, which means you got to hit it in the exact right spot. Otherwise, you're not going to get a spiral. And so the toughest thing about learning how to punt is learning how to consistently drop the ball in the exact same spot and then come through with the exact same motion. And to get that spiral, you want to kick straight through it. A lot of people think you got to like swipe across the ball to get it to spin, but that's not how the mechanics of it work. The mechanics work that the ball's on the outside of your foot and it's slightly angled in and you come straight up through it. That's going to make the ball spiral and, look like an NFL punt. And yeah, it goes a lot farther, a lot higher.
That's interesting. So when you're coaching now, is the recruitment process still the same? You just line them all up? Try. See if they kick the extra point.
Yeah, pretty much I ask, hey, has anyone had soccer experience? and then, or are you a good enough athlete that you can do this? Because usually at the freshman level, you're getting one or the other. I've had we had one year where our starting quarterback was also our starting defensive end, and he was our starting place kicker and punter. So, I mean, he's literally just the best athlete on the team. It's like, all right, well, I've got no one else who can do this. Here, I'll try to teach you as much as I can. Because I mean, he's never going to go on to be a punter or kicker. Like he's going to be a DN. But yeah, it was really funny just seeing him out there because it's like other teams like, wait, that's your quarterback and your DN and your kicker.
Well, come senior year, one of those skills will presumably rise to the top, and then it's like, well, that's what you're going to be doing in college, and maybe in the NFL. Or that's what.
Well, I was going to say that's one of the really interesting things that you see from NFL athletes is usually like they were that guy in high school, right? Like they played all the positions, they played all the sports, and like for me, coming in my like freshman year, the varsity soccer team was like recruiting me to play goalie. But I was just so burnt out at that point that I was like, I'm done with soccer. 'Cause I played club soccer at a really high level growing up, and so like I'd initially thought going into high school I was going to get a scholarship eventually for either goalie in soccer or pitching in baseball. Because I was starting like mid 80s as a freshman, and like football just ended up being the thing. And so for a lot of NFL guys, it's like, yeah, they're multi-sport stars, you know, no matter what position they played, they're just good athletes. And then they eventually transitioned that into football. And then within football, they transitioned it into a specific position.
Yeah, it is amazing to me. Well, did you always enjoy football the most? Is that what you have the most fun doing?
So that's the thing. I never even planned to play football growing up. Like I didn't care about football. Like I never watched it. It was, I mean, to be fair, I never really watched sports anyways. I'm a huge nerd. Like if I had screen time, it was going to be, okay, I'm playing the Nintendo, you know, like that's what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I was never really a big sports fan, but once I started playing football, like I really enjoyed being good at it. But there's not necessarily anything within the game that makes me say, oh, I have to go play football. It's just, yeah, no, I enjoy being good at things, and I was good at football.
Right on. So let's get into your time in the NFL. I first became aware of you because of how politically outspoken you were. So do you want to dive into some of that and what your experience was like going through all that?
Yeah, so most people who know me that like aren't immediate family members generally know me as the punter for the Vikings who wrote a incredibly obscenity-laced letter to a Baltimore politician titled "They Won't Magically Turn You into a Lustful Cock Monster," and it was essentially. I was writing during the time this was the big push to legalize same-sex marriage. And so at the time, it was in Minnesota, where I was at, there was a constitutional amendment trying to ban same-sex marriage. So they were going to put in the state's constitution that no gay marriage. In Maryland, which is where the legislator was who I wrote the letter to, they were trying to legalize gay marriage. So they were trying to pass a proposition that, gay marriage is now legal. Then I think there was also, I want to say Maine and Washington had similar ballots. One was a constitutional ban and one was a legalization. And so at this time, there was a player for the Baltimore Ravens, Brendan Iambidejo. He's a special teams guy, linebacker. And he'd been really vocal on this for a number of years. And so this legislator from Maryland, a state senator, his name was Emmett C. Burns, I believe, essentially wrote a letter to the Ravens saying, I don't like what this guy is saying. You should silence him, have him, focus on football. And so I saw the letter. I forget where I saw it. I think it was on like Pro Football Talk or something like that. And I read this letter and I'm just like, okay, hold up. I got a couple problems with this. First off, like, what's your problem with gay marriage? Like, it doesn't affect you in any way at all unless you happen to be a gay person who wants to get married. Like, that's literally the only people it affects. Second off, as an elected U.S. official, you should know what the First Amendment is. The First Amendment means you cannot tell a private citizen to be quiet just because you don't like what they're saying. Like, because he had sent this letter on official state stationery. It'd be one thing, if he was just on his own saying like, I don't like this, whatever, fine. You're a private citizen too. You can say what you want, but you can't bring the apparatus of government into trying to deny someone their right to speak. That's literally one of the cornerstones of our nation, which more people understood that in the current age, but I'm sure we'll get to that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I wrote this counter response, essentially laying out like, why do you care about this? Gay people aren't gonna they're not gonna burst into your house and all of a sudden start an orgy. Like that's not how this works. Like, people just want to be left alone. B, you should know how the First Amendment works. And so that letter, it was published on Deadspin back when Deadspin was actually a legit site. It went super viral. I think it got like 4 or 5 million views or something like that. My Twitter account's blowing up. And so, started getting a lot of national attention about it. And the head coach at the time, Leslie Frazier, was not a big fan, I think primarily because of the attention. But the owner, Ziggy Will, if I remember, he came up to me during our first game against, I think it was the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he told me, he's like, hey, I really appreciate what you're saying. keep speaking out. And so after that, I had a conversation with my head coach where he was just like, you need to be quiet. Like, I don't want you speaking on this. But I'm like, okay, well, I'm hearing that from you, but I'm hearing from the owner that it's okay. So how do we square this circle? So at that point, it was like, okay, yeah, I can, keep speaking up. So eventually during that entire year, like I was doing, like radio appearances, a couple TV appearances, and we eventually defeated the amendment in Minnesota, which was great. And then I think about 6 months later, they passed an amendment saying same-sex marriage is legal, and I believe that's still on the books in Minnesota. And the downside for me was at the end of the season, the Vikings ended up drafting another punter. And I think it was the 4th or 5th round. And whenever you draft a punter higher than like round 7, he's going to be your guy the following year. Like you don't spend a draft pick on a punter or a kicker unless you know that he's going to be the guy. And so that was when I knew, okay, the Vikings are going to let me go. Like no matter what they say, this is not going to be a fair camp competition. Like they're not going to waste a draft pick. And at the time, I also held, I think, almost all of the Vikings punting records. So it was also like, wait a minute, why are you replacing me, even though I'm the best punter your team's ever had? And so tried to catch on with the Raiders. I spent the preseason with the Raiders. Eventually got beat out there by Marquette King, which I had no problem with. I mean, he legit beat me out. He was a really good punter. And tried to latch on to a couple other teams. And eventually when I was with I had a tryout with the Bengals after Kevin Huber got his jaw broken on Sunday Night Football. And I really felt that I had won that tryout. Like I was like, okay, they need a veteran guy. They're not looking for a long-term solution. They just need someone here because they're trying to make a playoff run. They need someone who knows how to directional kick. And I, performed during the tryout and showed them I could do all that. And they ended up going with another guy at the tryout who had shanked a couple, but had hit a couple long ones. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess they wanted to go with him. They cut him 2 weeks later and then brought in a third guy, Zoltan Mesko. He used to be the punter for the Patriots. And Zoltan's a great dude. And like, he's a really good punter. The problem is Zoltan wasn't at the tryout. And so basically at that point, I was like, okay, I'm never playing in the NFL again because this is very clear to me that, And so that's when I wrote my second letter, which is the one that you referenced, which is I was fired by 2 cowards and a bigot, where I essentially called out the fact that my special teams coach had used some homophobic language during the season. And it really felt like as the season went on, he was really not happy about me speaking out on same-sex marriage, and not necessarily from an attention standpoint, but because it wasn't something he believed in. Like he didn't feel like that was something that should be allowed to exist. And then so he was the bigot in the 2 cowards and a bigot. And the 2 cowards were Leslie Frazier, my head coach, and then Rick Spielman, the GM, who were, the ones who let me go. Because for them, it felt like it was more of a business decision in terms of like, okay, this, he's a good punter, but we can find another punter. And, we just don't want to have to deal with the attention, which is why I said, 2 cowards, because like they could have dealt with the attention. Like that's what you should do. Like when people are trying to push back on basic human rights, but at the end of the day, they made a business decision. So, they let me go. So, hopefully that's not too much of a run-on explainer. It got the gist across.
No, I appreciate it. The only thing I know that you also had an injury too in that timeline, right? Like you had an injury.
It was a minor cartilage damage in I think it was in my right knee. It's either my right or left. I forget which one it was. It's clean. They go in, clean out the cartilage, and it's like a 1 month rehab. It's not really an injury. It was like I'd been kicking with it for about 4 years at that point. I just wanted to get the surgery done because I'm like, I should just get this fixed at some point. Because what was happening was during games, if I got hit the wrong way or fell the wrong way, the cartilage would fold over, and then it would feel like my knee had popped out of place. And so I had to kind of wiggle it, to get to pop into place. And so it's not a bad injury. Like you can play. Obviously I played with it. The problem is that like if that cartilage gets folded over and then gets stuck, well, now you definitely have to go in surgically and repair that. Cause otherwise it feels like your knee is locked up. Cause I had the exact same injury on my left knee in college, and it really sucked.
Yeah, I mean I think that's just I think that's the difference between a professional athlete and a regular person. Because to a regular person, that just sounds like, oh my god. But to you, you're like, yeah, I had to go easy for a month. It's like, okay,
Yeah, well, so that's not even the worst injury I had in the NFL. So my rookie year, we were playing in Detroit, and there was a high snap. So I batted the ball down, rolled out to my right, and kicked it. Got the ball away. And when I landed, I felt my right knee buckle. And so I was like, okay, I think I did something there, but I'm a rookie, I got to keep playing. And then later in the game, a dude came in off the edge, dove straight onto my ankle. Like I thought I'd broken my ankle. I was like, wow. So knocked me out of the rest of the game. It turns out it was just a really bad sprain. Couldn't play the next game because I still couldn't put any weight on it. But when they MRI'd the ankle, I'm like, hey, can you take a look at my knee too? Because I think I did something. And so they came back and they're like, yeah, your knee's damaged. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound great, but I guess it's damaged. So I finished out the last 3 games of the season punting with a damaged right knee. That's my kicking leg. And then the day after the season ended, so you get your exit physicals. And the doctor comes up to me. He's like, yeah, your ACL's torn. You should probably get that fixed. I was like, oh, really? So, yeah, putting 3 games at the NFL level with a torn ACL in your kicking leg, not ideal. But, yeah.
It is just so wild to me. And even just, when I was in high school, there was the final city game for the city championship was between my high school and then the opposing high school had Larry Fitzgerald, who I'd imagine you kind of knew of because because I think we're around the same age. Oh, it was just there was just one guy on that field who was playing a different game than every other player on that freaking field, and nobody could catch him. It was just watching Larry Fitzgerald run around the field, and you realize even at that time as just a 17-year-old dude or whatever, I realized I'm like, so that's the guy who I'm going to see on TV someday. Like that's the level you have to play at. And then you go on and he was a very good NFL receiver, but he was just arguably a mid-level receiver. I mean, I think he made the Pro Bowl a couple times, but it's just incredible that it's like that's how good these people are. It's just humbling.
Yeah. So one thing I try to tell people, if you ever get the chance, try it. Like if you're at an NFL game and you get the opportunity to watch the game from the sideline, like absolutely take it, because it will blow you away how fast people are moving. Like it is unbelievable how quickly things happen on the field, because you see it from the TV perspective, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, you can see guys moving around, but it doesn't give the same sense of like actually being in that chaos. And it is unreal. Like I remember I came back, I think it was like my second or third year, I came back to my high school just to watch a practice, and I was like, damn, why is everyone moving so slow? Like was I that slow? But yeah, it's once you get used to that NFL speed, like nothing else is even close to fast. Like it's absurd how quick guys move.
Yeah. No, it's pretty crazy. So, well, do you enjoy the NFL now? Do you still enjoy watching it? I'll tune in for games. Like I'll probably tune into the Super Bowl because obviously it's a big event. I mainly watch just so that way if people ask me questions, I can answer them. So like, for example, on social media, I'm on Blue Sky now. People will ask me, like, hey, what do you think about this kicker? Or, what do you think about this punter? I'm like, okay, well, send me some film. And so then I can actually have an informed opinion as opposed to talking out of my ass. But yeah, for the most part, it was mainly my wife that used to watch a lot. And she's kind of moved on to the Premier League, watches a lot of soccer now. And then a lot of it's due to the fact that almost all the guys that I played with are no longer playing. They just kind of aged out. And so there's nothing really tying me to a specific team. I still kind of root for Minnesota because, obviously the franchise is cursed and they're going to win a championship eventually, but it's not going to be this year. So like, I do want them to win one. It's just,
you watch Vikings games because you know they're going to implode spectacularly at some point that you really don't expect it. Like it's just fascinating how many different ways they find to lose a game. So, but yeah, then this year actually, I was really hoping that we were going to get a Detroit Buffalo Super Bowl, because that would have been really cool. So,
the more underdog, especially Buffalo with their history of the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, it's like having both of them play each other like that would have been fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kansas City and Philadelphia are both really good teams, but they've already played against each other, and this feels kind of like the corporate Super Bowl we deserve instead of the popular Super Bowl we want.
Sure.
So, good job, America. We did it.
By the way, I actually have to make a quick correction here. I totally kind of had a brain fart. I said Larry Fitzgerald for the high school game. I meant Steve Brettston. It wasn't
okay.
Larry.
Yeah, I was going to say, because Larry Fitzgerald was really good.
Yeah. No, Larry Fitzgerald. Steve Brettston did fine in the NFL too, but I met Steve Brettston. Yeah. Steve Brettston was who I would watch, and he just ran all over the field. And then in the NFL, he did fine, but it just shows how good NFL players are. Larry Fitzgerald, I watched at Pitt. So I had a brain fart on the names there, but yeah, Steve Brettston was the high school one.
No worries.
Sports aren't my main element, Chris.
That's fine.
So looking back on it now, did anybody, be it the Two Cowards or the Bigot or anyone else, did anyone ever apologize to you or revisit all this with you in the year of our Lord 2025? Or
no, I've not heard from anyone. I did end up suing the team, and we ended up settling. I basically they had to pay a whole bunch of money to a couple different LGBTQ charities, Trevor's Project being the main one, and that was something that I made very clear when the lawsuit was going on, was like, I'm not doing this to get money for me. Like, I'm doing this to tell you there are consequences, like, for your actions. Like, if you want to get rid of someone because they stood up for civil rights, well, then I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that the next time you have to make that choice, you think about it, because maybe you'll get stung again. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I mean, the thing with the NFL that's really interesting is that the player base is a really diverse mix of views and opinions, because you're drawing from all across the country, right? You got players that are coming from everywhere. So, whether it's really far right with Bosa, or, really far left with, say someone like Kaepernick, like there are a lot of different viewpoints across the political spectrum. The problem is, once you get into the coaches and the managers and the front office and the owners, that tends to shift way right, especially among ownership, because they're old, rich white men for the most part. And I don't know if you've noticed, but old, rich white men tend to have specific viewpoints that favor old, rich white men. And yeah, it's not working out so well for us as a country right now. So hopefully we can get that fixed.
Well, how did you feel when Kaepernick happened? Because that was a few years after you, and Kaepernick was that was so in the spotlight. And then it was just so painfully obvious. I mean, especially, look, I may misspeak about a couple players from, 20 some years ago, but when the Kaepernick thing happened, it was so, I forget, I think it was Tennessee, where it was just so obvious that their offense at the time needed a mobile quarterback, and Kaepernick was right there. He was right there, and they wouldn't even consider it. And it was just so painfully obvious that this guy was just blacklisted for what he did. Yep. So how did you feel while all that was going on?
Yeah. So it was funny because my wife and I actually had a conversation, and we were like, yeah, if I hadn't been blackballed before for the gay rights stuff, I definitely would have been blackballed then for joining Kaepernick and taking a knee. Because that would have been right in my wheelhouse. We're like, oh, cool. Yeah, let's do it. Because the thing is like, the issues he was trying to address, I mean, police brutality, that's still a thing in America. It's been a thing for a long time. And a lot of our current issues, not just police brutality, but like the current stuff that's going on with like Musk and Trump, is that we as a country really have not dealt with the fact that Reconstruction failed. Like you go back and you look at after the Civil War, there was a plan in place to try to get rid of racism in America. And like people were working really hard to try to do that. I mean, that was Reconstruction. And then after about, I think it was like 13 or 14 years, like the white former slave owners were just like, nope, we really like our racism way too much. And so, that's when you start introducing segregation. And, as a country, we still have not grappled with that. And until we do, until we address this ongoing wound from our past, we're going to keep having problems, because racism isn't something that logically makes sense. It's something that it just makes people act because they believe a certain way. And until we figure out how to fix that, people are still going to keep acting against their best interests because they feel that that's what's appropriate. Like, I mean, it's stupid to be racist. Like, it costs you money. It costs you intelligence from, getting to know other people. And as in terms of our social compact, it frays away at the edges of us being able to work as a society. So Kaepernick hit on a big part of it, and we still haven't addressed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, how do you feel about, I mean, if we want to get super topical, the NFL's decision, we're not going to have end racism in the end zone this year. And it's just like, I mean, it's a little bit frightening that we're living in a culture where a message like that is somehow seen as divisive. I'm like, who feels that that's divisive? That's my concern. We know who, but
yeah, well, and again, this is where it's such a self-defeating philosophy, because the NFL might think, we have to bow down to Trump and get rid of anything that even remotely hints at being like non-segregationist, because that's what will allow us to keep making money. But what they don't understand is that a large chunk of people who would otherwise consume your product just saw you do that and are going to be like, welp, I guess I've got other things I can spend my money on. And so, yeah, they think they're doing the right thing from a financial standpoint, but driving people away is never a good business decision. Like it's so stupid. Like forget the moral aspects of it for a second. Like, you are literally costing yourselves money.
Hey, I mean, honestly, speaking as one guy, I used to like the NFL a lot. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so it's sort of drilled into you.
Right, yeah.
And I enjoy the game. I think it's a very fun, wonderful game. But in recent years, I don't watch the NFL much at all for a number of reasons. And some of them, the moral stuff is just like the icing on top of the I'm not going to tune in cake. Because right. I just feel like they over scrutinize. I mean, I'm sure you remember when this happened, when that announcer goes, "We don't know what a catch is." That was when I literally, physically, right? And metaphorically just turned the TV off, and I was like, "Well, this is over now. You don't know what a catch is. I'm done." I watch more college now. I enjoy it. And then, I'm also, my favorite sports to watch are hockey and soccer. But but yeah, I just don't tune in the way I used to, because it's like, well, not only did you completely bastardize and ruin this game to the point where I feel like you might as well just draft attorneys and have 90% of the game being them deliberating everything. But all this other stuff where you're turning the game into a war rally and having, all these things to appease the owners, and people like Chris Kluwe and people like Justin Jackson and people like Colin Kaepernick are being told to shut up. It's like, all right, I'm not tuning in anymore.
Yeah, it's a shame too, because football it's a really cool sport from the idea of tactically and strategically what you're trying to accomplish, and just the pure physical element of football, of being 270 pounds and running a 4.6 40. I don't think people understand how ridiculous that is from just pure physics. It is really hard to get something that heavy moving that quick. But that's one of the amazing things about football. And the fact that they just keep trying to they keep upping the gambling aspects. They keep trying to make it where it's we have to hyper define every single little rule, and then just makes it more ill defined in the process. I don't know that they've killed the golden goose, but I think the axe is getting pretty close to the neck because I mean, like especially with the CTE stuff, and now people are really aware of the risks of playing football. It's like, well, my kid who's a really good athlete, I could either give them permanent brain damage, right? Or I could have them go play another sport where they're not going to get permanent brain damage. What will I choose? So, yeah, and I've seen that at the local level. Like this will be my sixth year coaching freshman football coming up, and every year attendance like has gone down in terms of kids trying out for the football team. Like when I remember when I was in high school, like our freshman team had I think like 90 or 100 kids on it. I mean, and to be fair, we're a pretty big school, but like that was pretty consistent. Like freshman football, like you had a lot of people out there. And I think this last year we had like 55, 54. And like that's the year before we had like 58, the year before we had like 63, the year before we had like 65. So you see this steady trend of declining because again, parents are making choices that they don't want their kids to suffer long-term harm for, in most cases, they're never going to play past high school, right? Like why even risk it if you're only going to play for 4 years? Like you have a 1% chance of going from high school to college, and then you have a 1% chance of going from college to the NFL. So like you're better off buying a lottery ticket because you're going to save yourself some brain cells.
Yeah. Well, what do you think the fix is for all that? I mean, I know they're saying, oh, the helmet technology, like what is the fix for, is there a fix for that?
There really is no fix for the CTE problem because you can't pad the inside of someone's skull. And the trauma comes from when your brain hits the inside of your skull. Now, like you can try and affect that by slowing down the rate of the collision, right? Which is what they're trying to do with the helmet technology. They're trying to make the hits less like impactful. But that runs into the problem of, okay, great, you're making the big hits slightly less impactful, but what we're seeing is a lot of the trauma is actually coming from the repetitive hits. So like the guys on the line, just constantly smashing their heads into each other, guys who are blocking against each other, constantly banging their heads into each other. So it's not really any one specific big hit, although that can happen. It's more the accumulation of all these little hits. And especially like in high school, if you're learning to tackle and your coaches are assholes, they're going to be like, just line up and bang into each other. Well, great. That's the equivalent of like 50 car accidents that day. That's going to add up, even if you only play for 4 years in high school. So for me, I think at some point the NFL is going to have to go to flag football at the high school level. Like it's just going to have to be flag football. And then at the college level, ideally what they would do is make it so that if you are a college level football player, you're not expected to be a student. So essentially you're a school employee. They pay your salary, you get healthcare. And then if you want to keep the scholarship aspect, you have it so once they're done playing college football, then you can come back and get your degree if you want to get your degree. Because what that does is it makes it so the guys who are only there to play football, because a lot of guys are there only to play football, right? That are on scholarship. Like they're really good at football, but they're not necessarily there to get a degree. It allows them to focus on what they think is their path to success, which is trying to make it to the NFL, without burdening them with classes. And then for the guys who want to play football, but also want to get a degree, now they have a chance to, okay, I can try to make it to the NFL. And if it doesn't work out, I know I can still come back and get my degree. Whereas now there's only so many hours in the day, right? And as a college athlete, especially one on scholarship, at least in my time, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't changed, it's made very clear to you that you are there to play football first. In school second. Like you can't really ask your coaches, hey, I've got a test during practice time. Can I miss practice to go take the test? It's like, no.
That doesn't fly. You don't say.
Yeah, like that, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, I really do think that what the NFL has to do, they have to limit the amount of hits, like, and you have to start that at a younger age. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see Pop Warner start getting phased out, where it's just like, these are 7, 8, 9-year-olds. Like they don't need to be smashing their heads into each other. And the thing is, like, if you're a good enough athlete to play at the college or NFL level, you can learn how to tackle with a year or two of practice. And so that's your freshman, sophomore year in college. Like now you've saved your body a whole lot of wear and tear up to that point. And for the 99% of guys who would never play in college anyways, well, now they don't have the brain trauma that would come if you're playing full contact high school football.
I completely agree with everything you just said. However, there are certain places, namely like almost anywhere, where if you gave that same spiel, you would be chased out of whatever area with
Oh
pitchforks.
yeah, no,
So.
you'd be tarred and feathered. Like, I'm not taking off football.
I mean, I do. Even just saying they should be paid, which I 110% support. They should be paid. It is absolutely criminal that they're not paid at the college level, I think, with all the revenue that's brought in
Right.
and the way they're putting their bodies on the line. And I actually never thought about the way you put it, but I think that's even better. Yeah, like have them, like give them a deferral. If they ever want to go back and get their degree, they can, but they are hired just to play football.
Right.
I think that's
Yeah,
actually...
Right.
That's a
Like
cool idea.
it's the capitalist mindset, right? Like you're an employee, you're doing a job, you should get paid to do that job.
Mm-hmm. So if you were playing right now, what do you think you would be most outspoken about? And additional question alongside that, how would you describe your personal politics?
So, I mean, I'll answer the first one first because it's super easy. Obviously, what Trump and Musk are doing to our government, because they are effectively shredding our Constitution right now. And it is really disheartening to see that a lot of mainstream media is not reporting on it in the way it needs to be reported on. Like, I think Wired is pretty much the only publication right now that's really diving into, like, this is unconstitutional what they're doing. Like the president is not a king. He is one of three separate powers, and those powers are supposed to be co-equal. And it, like, the fact that our Congress is ceding so much power to him, and the fact that the Supreme Court probably won't uphold any of the challenges is, like, it's really concerning. Because again, we are a representative democracy. We're not a monarchy. We're not an autocracy. We're not a dictatorship. Like, we don't have one person says my will is law. Like, we fought an entire war about that. It's how the country was founded. And so, yes, that would be every press conference I was doing. I would be like, this is unconstitutional. These people should be in jail. We really need to figure out, like, as Americans, it's not, your patriotism isn't flying the biggest flag or having, the most American gear on. It's, do you actually abide by the principles of this country, which is everyone has a fair shot. Everyone can succeed. And granted, we haven't always lived up to that, but no one is above anyone else. Like, it's supposed to be the land of opportunity and equality. Like, that is the dream of America. And right now it is the nightmare of America. So yes, that's what I would be speaking up on right now. In terms of my personal politics, I like to refer to myself as like a benevolent anarchist, in that ideally everyone would understand why it's important to take care of the people around you, because you should treat others the way you would want to be treated, and people should be free to live their own lives how they want, as long as they're not hurting anyone else. That being said, I'm also a history and political science major, so I know that is not human nature. So we do need some guidelines and some rules and restrictions to keep the people who want to, like, hurt other people to get what they want, to keep them from doing that. And so I'd say I have issues with our current political structure, and that I think the first past the post two-party system really is one of the main reasons why we're in the position we're in, because there's no real way to challenge one of the major parties unless they just implode. Like, unless you get a case like the Whigs or the Southern Democrats shifting to become the new Republican Party. Like, those are really the big upheaval things that cause a new political party that can actually work and that people will vote for to come into existence. And right now we don't have that. And it's a problem, because if you want liberal ideas or even leftist ideas, your only choice is to be in the Democratic Party. Like, you can't run as an offshoot party, because all you're going to do is take votes away, because the Republicans are going to vote in lockstep for whatever their party says, this is what we're doing. Because at this point, the Republican Party isn't really a political party. It's a cult. Like, there is no, there's no ethos to it other than we want power and we want to be able to tell you what to do. Like, that is the Republican Party in a nutshell right now. And I mean, I know some people will listen to that and be like, oh, you're just making stuff up, or, oh, that's like, how can you say that? It's like, all you have to do is look at what's happening. Like literally, Republicans control the Congress. If they didn't want Donald Trump to be a king, they could shut this down immediately. Like the fact that none of the Republicans in Congress have done anything to stop the unconstitutional actions of Trump and Musk tells you that they're just in it for power. Like they don't have any overall view or vision of what this country should be that encompasses all the people within it. So yeah, I vote Democrat because I have to. I would prefer to have better choices. Hopefully like AOC runs, because I think she's probably the best bet we have to get anything close to back to equality at this point. But I unfortunately, like I said, I studied poli-sci history in college, and all empires fade. Like there's no empire that lasts forever.
Yeah, we're hitting that 250 mark.
Yeah, most empires are right in between 200 to 300 years. Like that's usually about how long they last as a cohesive entity. And I would like things to be different, but yeah, history is starting to rhyme once again. It's unfortunate.
I feel you, and you know, the way you described our contemporary scene is tragically very accurate. And you know, I mean, I'm registered as a green, but if I didn't live in California, I probably wouldn't even be able to do that much, because it's like here in California, you know, there's such a monolith with the Democratic Party that it's like, well, you can register elsewhere to try to like build up a third party.
Right.
In other states, you don't even have the luxury of doing that, because if you do that, they just completely neuter you as a voter. In California, that's not really the case. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm fighting for the change I want to see while still recognizing we don't live in that world yet at all.
Right.
And getting closer to it is just such a heavy freaking lift.
Right. It's and the other problem with it too is the fact, excuse me, with Citizens United, it's almost impossible for any third party to form at this point, because they simply don't have the funds. Like, unless you got a cabal of billionaires together to be like, okay, we're going to run a specific person. Problem is they did that and they chose Trump. So
right.
If that was going to be our savior, billionaires are not going to be our savior. Like, that's not how it's going to work.
I could say, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we really need some form of either like ranked choice voting, which determines, you know, sort of the next cycle's funding, right? So then that way, at least you can start building a base as an opposition party, or some sort of parliamentary system where, you know, it's basically whatever percentage of the vote you get determines how many seats you get. Now, granted, there's problems with parliamentary systems in that everyone gets a choice to vote for someone, so you can get out and out Nazis as a party, because if enough of the population votes for them, well, they get seats. But that being said, it really does feel like our current system is just, it's showing the outer edges of what a two-party system is capable of, and it's breaking down under the strain. Like it's no longer capable of handling what a healthy society needs under unlimited money in political actions, and coupled with a two-party system.
Yeah, I feel you. And yeah, a parliamentary system, well, certainly imperfect, I think would be better, because at least you know that those Nazis are freaking Nazis.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And then you also have, I mean, you're going to get, you know, Greens are going to get a couple seats, Socialists are going to get a couple seats, Communists are going to get a couple seats, and then coalitions form where they kind of cooperate with each other, you know, from the left to the center left. And that's just perfect.
Well, that's how government's supposed
better.
to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a lot better. But yeah, I feel you. Well,
actually, if I can interject real quick, because this is one drum I love to bang, is that I don't know if we'll be able to get rid of Citizens United. Obviously not with the current Supreme Court. But like the big thing I wish we could do is campaign finance reform, and I would love to actually make it more like football, in that. In football, one of the things that makes the NFL so great is that it is a completely communistic system in terms of how money is distributed. Every year, teams get the exact same amount of money from the overall, you know, TV contracts and everything. So every team has the exact same amount of money to spend on players every year. And then it's up to the team what they do with that money. So what I would like to see from our political system is instead of having parties solicit for donations, right, and try to outspend each other, if people want to donate, have all that money go to a common pool. And then anyone who is qualified for the race, you'd have different levels based on whether it's a local race, a state race, a countrywide race. If you qualify for one of those levels by getting enough signatures or whatever, you get a slice of the pie. And so then it becomes no matter how much money is donated, everyone gets the same amount of money to run their campaign. And then it becomes, how do you get your message out? How are you talking with people? And that makes it more about what is your message versus how many places can I blast out my message to drown out the other voice? Because that's currently what we're seeing, is that like all this money going in is effective. It's propaganda. It's being used for propaganda purposes. Like, and they're essentially buying votes without technically buying votes. And it is killing our political system. Like, I think it's really hard to run a campaign against someone who has like 10 times the amount of funds you do.
Absolutely. Well, and they buy ballot measures too. They buy. Especially here in California, it's like you look at.
Yeah, no, I've seen a couple of those.
Oh yeah, it's like they just buy their way through like intense propaganda that the grassroots can't compete against.
Right. So again, if everyone's drawing from a common pot, then great, billionaires, spend as much money as you want. Like, as long as you qualify as a candidate, then you get a piece of the pie.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Publicly funded, and then I think our election season needs to be 6 weeks max. So
for sure.
Like 6 weeks, you all get the same amount of money, which I think should be no more than $100, and then have at it.
And then voting, I would actually make a week-long process, and it's a national week holiday. So everyone gets the week off, and then go vote when you want.
Yes, I'm with you. I also think automatic registration, and you can vote when you're 16. If you can drive a car, you can cast a ballot. That's what I say. And if you're going to be sent to war in 2 years, you should have a say in
right.
In who's
you should be able to choose whether or not that we go into that war.
Well, so let's briefly talk about the other parts of your life. You do music, you do writing. Dive into some of that for me.
Sure. Yeah. So I've always been a huge nerd my whole life. Played ton of video games, read science fiction, fantasy growing up. And then, I have a really broad array of hobbies that I like to do, and I like to be good at the things that I do. So I put in time and effort to try to be good at them. So yeah, I'm the bass player in a band called Tripping Icarus. Unfortunately, we don't play anymore because the three other guys, they're friends of mine from Minnesota, and they're all still in Minnesota, and I'm in Southern California. So it makes it a little tough to get the band together. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that. I played the violin growing up, which is my musical background, and then stopped playing once I got to high school because usually when you get to high school, it's either sports or music after school. And I was also getting kind of burned out on the violin at that point too. So I was like, all right, just going to go play football, just make a clean break. But and then I created a tabletop game. It's a card game similar to Magic the Gathering, although it's not a collectible card game. It's a limited something, whatever it is. You get the cards, you know what cards you're getting in the pack, as opposed to pulling a pack and then you're not sure what you're going to get. And that one's called Twilight of the Gods. Did decently well. It never sold gangbusters. I think our latest royalty check was like $2.70. So there's still someone out there buying the starter box. But that was a lot of fun because I've always enjoyed tabletop gaming and nerdy stuff like that. I started playing Magic the Gathering when it first came out. Played that for a long time. I love playing like Warhammer, War Machine, the miniature gaming stuff. So I have a couple fully painted armies that that I put together. And then I've written a couple books. One is a collection of essays. That one's called Beautifully Unique Sparkle Ponies. And so it's really just kind of a mishmash of all different sorts of ideas that I had. And as I told the publisher at the time, I'm like, I don't want to write the standard football book. Like because this was back, when I was getting a lot of notoriety for the same-sex marriage stuff. I was like, this is not going to be your typical, and then he grew up in this town. And, he went to the high school. That's where he learned the lessons that would help him to the NFL. So no, my book is very much not that. And then I also wrote a science fiction novel called Otaku, which I was really proud of. That was It got my favorite is it got 2 really good reviews from the American Library Association and then Publishers Weekly, and then Kirkus just hated it. they had a line in there that I still have as my flair on a couple Reddit forums. It was irredeemable in any world, real or virtual. I was like, oh, that I really hit a nerve on that one. So, but the thing is that what I wrote about was intended to hit a nerve, because basically Otaku was kind of my counterpunch to Gamergate, where I was just like, you guys are horrible, awful fucking people. Like you give nerds everywhere a really bad name, and I dislike you. And so I want you to read this book and think that you should be the hero, but it's going to be very clear that you're not the hero. So, yeah. So that one was fun. And then, just kind of working on some other stuff. I actually have a free book on Royal Road. It's called Shades of Forever. That one was more just a writing, like it was one of the writing, not workshops, but like Nano, where you're trying to just hit a word count milestone. And so I started writing it. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna see if I can write 55,000 words in a month. And then as I got going, I was like, oh, actually, I have a story to tell. I want to tell here. And so people seem to really like that one, and you can read it for free if you want. I try to stay busy.
Where can people go to learn more about you?
At Chris Warcraft on Blue Sky. I am no longer on Twitter because I got banned for impersonating Elon Musk.
You're one of those.
Yep. It was when he first rolled out that plan to start selling blue checks. I'm like, this is the stupidest fucking idea I've ever heard. And I'm gonna show you why it's the stupidest idea. Because basically, like I had a couple tweets go super viral because like I changed my background and everything. Like I went full on impersonation of Musk. Like the accounts looked identical. And then I just started tweeting stuff that he would like complete opposite of what he believes. and so people are like, Elon, why are you saying this?
That's so funny.
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is what happens when you start selling accountability.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still
Blue Sky,
on.
At Chris Warcraft.
Yeah. Blue Sky's a lot of fun. I like it. I mean, I'm still on Twitter. I still use it, but I like Blue Sky so much better.
As I would highly encourage anyone on Twitter to get off Twitter, because at this point it's clearly the Nazi bar, and all you're doing it is lending the appearance of viability or respectability, and it's like the quicker people move on, the quicker they'll be able to start rebuilding. Because at this point, it's gonna have to be a rebuild, and like it doesn't necessarily have to be on Blue Sky. Like I mean. You can find communities anywhere, but highly recommend just don't be on Twitter anymore. It's the bad place.
Chris, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
That was Chris Kluwe. I highly recommend reading the Two Cowards in a Bigot piece. It's a really, really cool piece. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Day Watching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review, would you? This is still a very, very new podcast, and every 5-star review helps. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at Patreon, patreon.com/romplacone. For a Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of cool perks. I'm dropping some interviews from the vault. Recently, I dropped an interview with W. Kamau Bell right before he got his TV show. Also, we do a Zoom hangout once a month. It's a really cool way to connect with other like-minded, empathetic, fun, interesting people. That's been a really, really cool experience. I do some jokes. We have a chat. It's awesome. Patreon.com/romplacone, and you get insider info to all upcoming films. Give What You Can level, patreon.com/romplacone. Really cool community. We are officially 3/4 of the way to 100. This is 75. We are 3/4 of the way to 100, which means we will be 1/10 of the way to finishing the 1,000. I feel like one day it's just going to be 999. And all of a sudden, I'm just going to, wow, really? We're already here. But it's going to take about 20 years. Welcome to the journey. See you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Romplacone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.